On to both a new series and a new console, yet not actually a very different type of game. Sonic Mega Collection Plus is going to provide a few different examples of really short games we can do. Are my PS2 composite cable's not working? It's only coming through one channel. Unless it's the splitters. It might be the composite cables. Oh well. I might try and find some different ones later. Oh no, it's not. No, it's working fine. At least now. But two of the games on this collection that are actually going to be really, really short is actually both versions of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which is not only similar to each other, obviously, but it's also very similar to Kirby's Avalanche, which we have already done, because it is, in fact, another version of Puyo Puyo. And again, there are like slight differences across most of the versions. Or across different versions. I don't know about most of the versions, really. And I'm not really sure what, if any, major differences there are in this version of the game. I know, well, this one does have a password system, which Kirby's Avalanche didn't. You also have to start at level 1. You can't start at level 4 like you can in Kirby's Avalanche. Not that that really matters, because the first few levels, that only really matters for time. Because obviously you have to play these levels, whereas you wouldn't in Kirby's Avalanche. But other than that, this is not one of the versions where doing just a single match gives 1 damage. I think of these, at least as far as I know of the original, like Puyo Puyo localizations, only the Genesis version of Mean Bean Machine does that, as far as I'm aware. I've never played whatever the PC version was. It's called like Quirks or something. Was it Quirks? I don't know what it was called. So I don't know how that version handles it. But I know in Kirby's Avalanche, it does not give damage for 1 match. You have to at least get a 5 match or a combo. And I know this game and Kirby's Avalanche both don't do that. Whereas the Genesis version of Mean Bean Machine does. And that, I honestly think, is what makes the Genesis version of Mean Bean Machine the hardest of these 3 versions of Puyo Puyo. Because the enemy, while you're trying to set up combos, the enemy being able to do just that little bit of damage over time, especially when it like blocks your combos, can really make it super difficult. Although this is one thing I was thinking was maybe different in this version of the game compared to other versions. But we do have another color now. Whereas I think there's only the 4 colors in most of the other versions. Whereas now this is having 5 colors to make matches with. I think it only goes to 5 colors. I don't think it'll be any more than that. Which is an interesting change. It's very small changes, but there are differences between each version, which is very interesting. And then obviously I completely even forgot about another version of original Puyo Puyo. Obviously just the original game, not even a localized version. Which, I can do that version as well. I do have it on Super Famicom. I just would need to A, set up my Super Famicom, and B, which actually would be the first step, figure out where my Super Famicom even is. I also need to be aware of the time. I don't have too much long to record, but Kirby's Avalanche didn't take that long. This game might take a little longer, just because I have to do slightly more levels. I think. I don't even know if there's the same number of levels between all of them. There may not be. But then I also don't know exactly how different some of these games become. There could even be other small differences that I'm not aware of. Like, how fast do each of the final levels become? How fast does each level become? When do they start speeding up? You know, because if this game is just overall slower than Kirby's Avalanche, then it might take longer. Especially because when the levels start getting difficult, I do think the faster it goes, kind of the easier it becomes. And it only becomes easier because it's a lot quicker for the enemy to make a ton of mistakes. Especially because they start dropping super fast. Which means that they have a lot quicker chance to make mistakes. Whereas if you're dropping slower, then you have less time to take damage and less time to make mistakes. But that was stage 4. So now it's stage 5. So about 10 minutes to get to the point where we would have started with Kirby's Avalanche. Yeah, definitely, I've been making a lot more progress today than the previous days. Going from 3 games to 1 game to, if I finish this today, 5 games. Which will be pretty good. But to be fair, I did have more time today than I did yesterday. And I am picking shorter games than I was on day one. Not that I was picking long games on day one, but Rough Trigger was kind of a bit longer of a game than I need to be focusing on right now. And with the way I've been making progress, with having just a ton of games, that I'm able to do just all in a row, it definitely makes it seem like I should be able to get quite a few games done for the challenge. But the thing is when will I run out of these super, super short games to do? Are there really a finite number of these insanely short games, or am I going to be able just to do a ton of short games every day? I did ask a few people for estimates before I started this of how many games they thought it was possible to beat in a year. And I got 3 different estimates. The lowest estimate I got was 120. Which I feel like is a little too low of an estimate. I feel like, because I feel like I could definitely, for quite a while, average at least 1 game a day, right? I think that should be fairly easy, because on most days, even if I have to end up doing like 4-hour games, those can still be done in 1 day, as long as I have 4 hours to spend. Which maybe I won't always. But the thought that I wouldn't at least be able to average 1 game a day for most of the days in the challenge, I just don't see that being very likely. The middle estimate I got was 200. That one I think is a little more fair. Because that one I think does kind of go over if there did come a point where I couldn't average 1 game every day. You know, if I just have days where I don't have a lot of time, or I do somehow end up running out of games I can do in 1 day, but still gives a lot of assumption of a lot of time where I can do at least 1 game every day. So to me, that one's a little more realistic. But the highest estimate I got was actually 500, which is a pretty large estimate. That assumes that on most days, I can average 2 games per day. And maybe if I try really hard, I can. And I'm not saying that that seems unrealistic to me. I think that could happen. The thing is it does depend on time and how many short games I'm still finding after a while. Because with the way it's feeling right now, it does feel like there still are a lot of really short games to do. I can think of a lot off the top of my head. But then what happens when I've exhausted all the ones I know are really short? Do I have to go to... Do I have to go to doing a lot more that are very short? Or that are a bit longer, but I can still do in one day? Or can I find a lot of games that are really short that maybe I didn't initially consider? No, that's not gonna work. 15 minutes though. And this is only level 7, so I don't know if I'll be able to do it, but the levels may still get a bit shorter. I feel like, though, damage doesn't do as much in this game as it did in Kirby's Avalanche. I feel like you do a lot of damage in Kirby's Avalanche, you pretty much guaranteed win in one turn. But that's definitely not been the case in this game. I guess I kind of did a lot, but maybe the other people, when I initially started, they weren't built up as much. Maybe that's the strat, is instead of doing a big move right at the start, let them build up a little. So then they don't have as much leeway to clear it out. I do need to look at how many levels are actually left. Because there's still a few, because we still have, like, the Angry Sun-looking dude. Sir Fuzzy Logic. The, like... the one other guy, and Scratch and Robotnik. After this, at least. And I don't know if I'm forgetting any. I might be. And then I don't know if this also goes with what I remember from the Genesis version of Mean Bean Machine, where I think in the Genesis version of Mean Bean Machine I find Scratch to be the hardest fight, rather than Robotnik. But even then, I kind of think I also feel that way for Kirby's Avalanche. I honestly think Meta Knight might be harder than DDD. Just because DDD and Robotnik... Alright, so there's 6 levels left, so we're over halfway done. But DDD and Robotnik, they just drop too fast, to where a lot of times you just win because they happen to lose. All on their own, without too much input from you. Whereas I don't think Meta Knight and Scratch do that quite as much. That's pretty good damage. But again, this game is definitely a lot like Kirby's Avalanche and how a lot of other Puyo Puyo games will be. Kind of just play until you win. And even then, all these versions of original Puyo Puyo, that's not even every Puyo Puyo game to do. So there are plenty of other Puyo Puyo games to try out and see. I know there's Puyo Puyo Sun. There's both the console version and the handheld version of that game. There's Puyo Pop on Game Boy Advance. I definitely know I can do that one. I've done that one plenty of times. And I don't know if there are many other... Or I know there are other Puyo Puyo games, I just don't know which ones are necessarily viable. Because I know the Puyo Puyo Tetris games have story modes, I just don't know how long those take. And definitely, you know, searching for other games in the similar genre, which ones are viable, which ones can I do. Because as long as you can, you know, retry until you win, technically there shouldn't be anything preventing those from being viable games. There are a couple I know I should be able to do. I can definitely do Tetris Attack. I think Tetris Attack is a lot easier than Puyo in terms of how easy it can be to win. Because Tetris Attack is a lot easier to maneuver through than this game. Like, this game you have to be thinking ahead. Tetris Attack, kind of, but it's a lot easier to very intentionally make moves in that game. Then Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo on the Game Boy Advance. Got that one unlocked. I can do that for sure. And then it would just be looking at what other games in the genre there are, and can you beat them? I looked into the game Zoop, because I do have that on SNES. That one's really short, but that's one of those games that loops forever. There's no real ending to the game. If there was a real ending to the game, I would do it. But since there is no actual ending, I don't think you can even argue that you can even beat the game. Because there's no ending. But yeah, it definitely is crazy that we get to the part where the game... It's supposed to be harder at this point. And yeah, I haven't lost sense grounder. Because just when it gets faster, they become so much easier. In fact, a lot easier than even in Kirby's Avalanche. Because I still was losing a couple rounds in Kirby's Avalanche. But in this game, it's been way easier at this point than it had been previously. But I also think Tetris DX on the Game Boy Color is probably a pretty good one, because that just has 40 lines mode, where all you have to do is clear 40 lines. It's not difficult at all to do that. And I need to look into Tetris Worlds, at least on Game Boy Advance, because I know you can kind of beat that game. I just don't know like what the actual definition would be, because there's like multiple game modes. But I don't know if you would have to beat every game mode. Or if just beating one would be satisfactory. That'd be one I'd have to look into. And then I don't know anything about the Dr. Mario games and how those would be. And then I'm not sure what else is really in the genre that would also possibly be viable games. But I could definitely look. It just preferably need to be a game where if you like lose or game over, there's not any like restart the whole game feature. Because if that's the case, then that could make what is technically a short game really long, because you're playing it over and over and over. I'm kind of trying to avoid those. Unless I think I can beat it. Of course. Super Mario Land's one of those games. I can definitely do Super Mario Land, though. It's just going to be a bit of a pain because I have to do it on Game Boy Player, which means I have to use the GameCube controller, which is not an ideal way to play any Game Boy game, but especially not one with the physics of Super Mario Land. Yeah, Scratch is actually really difficult. It went from being fairly difficult to becoming super easy all of a sudden to now being difficult again. Definitely a weird difficulty in this game compared to Kirby's Avalanche. That's what still makes me very worried for Genesis Mean Bean Machine, because I remember that game just getting super difficult compared to the other Puyo Puyos. And then I don't know about original Puyo Puyo. I don't know how hard that game gets. But then I also have Puyo Puyo 2. I just need to look into how you actually beat that game, because I know the story mode's like different in that one compared to the original. Because in the original, it's like you fight, it's always the same rotation of enemies. So you fight the same enemies in the same order every single time. But I don't know if that's... It seemed like in Puyo Puyo 2 is like random each time. So I just need to make sure that that is like a game you can beat. Or at least just know what the win condition is. And the only reason I'm like unsure what the win condition is because I have it on actual Super Famicom, so the whole game's in Japanese. So I can't necessarily read if there is some sort of different win condition. And that would definitely be good to know if there is, because sometimes it's not super straightforward. Because like in... Okay, 31 seconds to be Robotnik. See what I mean? Scratch is way harder than Robotnik. It took 3 tries to beat Scratch, and then 31 seconds, I didn't do anything, and he just lost on his own. But like Puyo Pop on the Game Boy Advance, you don't beat it by playing every level. You have to like play every level, and then play every level in reverse order, and then you get the final level. So I would just need to make sure there's nothing like that in Puyo 2 before I just go and play it and then think I beat it and then actually not beat it. And I need to see if there is a password system in either of those games. Because again, there wasn't in Kirby's Avalanche, so it's possible there's not in original Puyo Puyo. But yeah, that is 9 games done so far in 3 days. So average of 3 games per day, and there still are plenty of games to keep that average up, if not surpass it. Again, who knows how long that'll last, but I'm definitely wanting to do as many as I can. Though there still are these really short games, and just pound through all the really short games. Because the short games are going to be short games no matter when I do them. So going ahead and having those done means that they will be done no matter what. But yeah, there still are plenty of short games. There's plenty of short games on Mega Collection Plus. Plenty more short games on GameCube, Wii, N64, Xbox. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.